Welcome to the real world. My name is Cameron. Thank you so much for joining us here on episode 110 of the Real World Podcast, where we're talking about the Terminator movies. We are really excited to do this. Been talking about doing this for a long time. On this episode, I'm joined by Bert. How you doing, man?
Hey Cam, how's it going? I've been gone a couple weeks and now I'm back.
He said he would be back, and he is back for this very special episode. So let's get started. Here we go. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Real World Podcast. Make sure you hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified of all our videos. Today we're talking about the Terminator franchise. Very excited to jump in and discuss these films that have been going on for 40 years. This is the 40th anniversary of the first Terminator movie. So really excited to do this. First, we wanted to just kind of talk about our individual experiences with the franchise. So Bert, why don't you kick us off and tell us kind of what your first experience was with this franchise of robo assassin time travel flicks?
Yeah, I came in at that time that I think probably a lot of people did was when it got super popular when T2 came out.
Okay.
So the brilliance of T2, which we'll talk about, of course, is what it grows from T1 with
Yeah.
Arnold then becoming sort of the good guy and the rescuer.
Right.
So that didn't really I couldn't fully appreciate that. I wish I would have
Mm,
seen Terminator 1 first.
yeah.
So I'll be interested in your thoughts, if you saw them all in order like that or not. But yeah, I came in at T2 and just was blown away regardless. And so
Sure.
then went back and watched T1. And then, there's been several years. This isn't like one where we got one every other year.
Right.
They've just sort of, gradually over time, over the last, 30, 40 years come out. So,
Right.
but yeah, T2 really grabbed me. Obviously, obvious appeal in that one.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, man.
Oh,
For
okay.
me, T2 was the first one I saw. Probably when I was maybe a little too young, but I just
Yeah.
loved it. I just loved
Yeah.
it. We had it on VHS, and
Hmm.
man, it just really had a big impact on me. I watched it so many times when I was growing up, and really connected with John Connor. I was probably about his age, maybe a little bit younger when I saw it. So
Yeah.
really connected with that character and Edward Furlong. His performance, I think, is great. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's where I came in, and then of course, T3 came out. I didn't end up seeing T1 till I think after I saw even Salvation after the fourth
Oh,
film. I think I
really?
didn't
Okay.
go back until after that. So yeah, yeah, really, really, just enamored with the franchise though from a young age. So it's one that's pretty personal to me because it's kind of again one of those that I grew up on.
Mm.
So yeah, a franchise that I've been with a long time and that I have a lot to say about. So are you ready to jump in and start reviewing them?
Let's do it.
All right, so kicking things off where it all began back in 1984, like I just said, celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. Actually, October 26th was the release date, so we're on the threshold of the anniversary date of the original Terminator movie. Has an hour and 47-minute runtime, budget of 6.2 million, grossed 78.3 million. So it was a pretty decent
Wow.
hit
Yeah.
back in 84 when it came out. Very low budget movie.
Mhm.
It's all kind of shot on location. It's all night shoots in LA, So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a movie that was one of those kind of almost like an independent film, really, essentially. I mean, this was James Cameron's directorial debut. I guess he got directing credit for Piranha 2.
Okay.
Um, that was like a low budget Roger Corman thing that he had to kind of step in and help with, I think, or
Oh.
something, and they ended up giving him credit for it. But this is his first film that he wrote and directed himself. Um, and he did a great job, man. This was, him bursting onto the scene, and doing something that was his own. It was a dream he had actually while he was, I think, working on
Yeah.
that Piranha film. He had this dream about this robot skeleton chasing after him, and he's like, "Man, that'd make a great movie." And so he went off and wrote it, and ended up, producing it, and did such a great job. It's got kind of it's an action movie. It's kind of a chase movie, but it's also got horror thriller vibes to it as well,
Yeah.
kind of like
Yeah.
a slasher film. I think he was thinking a lot about Halloween, Michael Myers, that kind of like
Hmm.
unstoppable killer
Yep.
coming after the girl. And so it has those kind of elements to it, but it's this, incredible mythology with this, time travel element and this future war between man and machine. And it's just got so many interesting things going on. Even though it's a very simple movie, really at its essence, it's really three characters. I mean, essentially, there's, of course, some
Yeah.
supporting
Yeah.
players too, but it's a very small scale movie, very intimate
Hmm.
film. I really like it. I think this movie is really well made. It's very character centric, character driven. I like to say it's sort of an A movie disguised as a B movie. It's one of these very genre driven films. Has all these elements to it that you'd think it's kind of just one of those throwaway, slasher movies, sci-fi movies or whatever. But there's really a lot more to it, and that's a testament to James Cameron and his
Yeah.
brilliant mind, working in this film.
Exactly.
I'm a huge fan of how they, again, it's character centric. So, we get, this glimpse of this kind of future war, which, the effects, of course, are ground. But we'll be talking about the effects for all these, but the effects are pretty groundbreaking, even for 84. A lot of stop motion work, rear projection, miniatures. They're using all these
Yes.
different elements that really
Hmm.
look good, and I think they still
Hmm.
hold up really well. Um, but getting back to the characters, we find Sarah Connor, who's kind of our central character here, and she's just so relatable. I love that you see her just kind of in a normal day, having a really bad day at work. She's waitressing and gets the orders wrong, and the kid dumps the ice cream in her pocket. Like all those little things just make it so kind of endearing and so again relatable. You just really
Yeah. Yeah.
connect with her character, just a very ordinary person. And then, of course, she gets thrust into this extraordinary circumstance, right? So, with Kyle Reese coming back as a soldier to protect her, Arnold Schwarzenegger, his big breakout role as the T-800, this Terminator, this robot sent back in time to kill her because she's going to give birth to the future leader of the human resistance who's going to take down Skynet. It's a really interesting idea, and it's just delivered expertly as well, I think. So thrilling action throughout this movie, relentless pacing. I mean, it's just really fast paced and just does not ever let up. Like I said, it's a chase film, really. The whole movie, they're being chased
Yeah.
down, hunted down by this Terminator. So there's a lot of car chases and foot chases, and a lot of action throughout it, and it's all really well done. We got to mention the great Stan Winston, as I mentioned, with the effects. He's doing the stop motion effects and the animatronics and the puppetry for the Terminator itself. So all of that looks good. Of course, the iconic quotes we've already mentioned, "I'll be back" and "Come with me if you want to live," that will get repeated throughout the franchise, became these
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
iconic moments of dialogue, are really good. As I mentioned, Arnold, it's his breakout role. He had, of course, done. I don't know if you've ever seen Hercules in New York, his first movie. Have you ever watched that?
No.
It's
No.
tons of fun to watch because it's so bad.
Oh, really?
It's yeah, it's quite hysterical to watch. But he's coming off of that and Conan the Barbarian,
Yeah. Yeah.
which was of course kind of his initial kind of big role, but this Terminator movie, launched him even further. And so he just does a really good job here. Cold calculating,
Hmm.
mission driven, no expression on his face the whole movie, basically.
Yeah.
Which is really, you think about it, it's pretty difficult, I would think, to pull off a performance like that, not having to emote and not having to do these things that most actors have to do. So I think it's a really good performance. I think Michael Biehn is fantastic. He delivers kind of the opposite performance. He's
Yeah.
very intense, very passionate character. As he's explaining to Sarah, what the Terminator is and what it's here to do, and these
Hmm.
these great moments that he has. And then of course Linda Hamilton, as I said, very relatable character, very natural. They say acting is reacting, and her reactions seem very realistic and natural to what's going on around her, all this craziness that she's in the middle of. I had to mention Lance Henriksen, who a lot of people will know from Aliens. He played Bishop. He's in this as
Yeah.
well. He and
Right.
James Cameron, I guess, were good friends. And
Oh,
so
makes sense.
he told him, actually, initially, he would cast him as the Terminator. And Lance
Really?
Henriksen was actually already preparing to play this role. He was doing a lot of research on mechanics and
Oh.
how he could play a robot. He had actually already picked out his costume and everything. And then the producers were like, no, we need a bigger name. We need a bigger presence. And so they brought in Arnold. James Cameron didn't want to cast Arnold initially, but after their first meeting, he really realized, okay, this guy would actually make a great Terminator. So he ended up giving Lance Henriksen the role of this police officer, which he does a great job in as well. And like I said, ended up, casting him as Bishop later. So he got to play a great role later. But yeah,
Right.
just overall, great cast, great effects, great story. It's simple, it's straightforward. And I think it just works on every level. I'm a huge fan of this movie. It introduces the themes of the films, which we'll get into. The themes of this whole franchise are really interesting to explore. So, big fan of the first Terminator. Bert, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think you alluded to a lot of the stuff that I was gonna, um, or you outright said a lot of stuff too of what I was thinking. But
Okay.
it's the world building that Cameron created for this little
Yeah.
small film. Like I think a
Hmm.
lot of directors, less capable, less savant like, would have just, this is a horror film, and he's going to chase her down, and there you go.
Yeah. Right.
But there's so much that's introduced already in the first film
Mm.
that again, I just think most filmmakers wouldn't even bother because they're
Yeah.
thinking, well, we might this might make a couple dollars, then I'll move on to the next project. And
Right.
but Cameron's thinking, I got to pack in this whole world, and that's what he
Yes.
does, right? Whether it's Avatar or almost everything he's doing,
Hmm.
they're almost like they're 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 made for sequels, really. I mean, they're kind of built to
Yeah.
be to where they could take off as sequels.
Sure.
um, so that's huge, obviously.
Hmm.
And his foresight with AI.
Mm.
I think there's a line in The Matrix where someone says something about AI, and
Mm.
then Neo says, "You mean artificial intelligence?" And that
Right.
that was a movie that came out in '99, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so just think about that. Even in 1999, filmmakers felt they had to explain what AI was. And
Right.
that's
Sure.
15 years after the first Terminator.
Yeah.
And yet, and think where we were with computers in 1984. Sure, they existed,
Right.
but just I mean, I don't know how Cameron had the foresight, except he's
Yeah.
just so involved in technology. and
Hmm.
and didn't you say that he was going to be like a teacher or engineer or something like that? And he didn't really want to be a filmmaker at
Yeah.
first.
Yeah, I think so. I think there was some background maybe in engineering. I know initially when he got into the film, well, he was a truck driver. And then when he
Oh,
saw
okay.
Star Wars, he got into the film industry and he got into it
Oh, that was
via
it.
special effects. So he was a
Okay.
special
Yeah.
effects guy for John Carpenter and all
Okay.
these other filmmakers. So yeah, he was always on the
Right.
technical side before he got into the directing and kind of writing.
Yeah. 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 So it's just again the world building, the stuff about the AI.
Mm,
I mean, who was thinking about that in 1984? I
yeah,
wasn't, but I was, pretty little. But
sure.
but anyway, yeah. I mean, this film has some really great stuff, like you mentioned, the casting, and the chase scenes are pretty intense.
Hmm.
It's just a very compelling story. The especially when you build in the time travel stuff.
Yeah.
Um, it's got a great sort of twist that Kyle Reese is the one that ends up impregnating Sarah. So then
Right.
he's, I mean, it's kind of a,
Yeah.
very twist you don't expect, I guess. A
Yeah.
really great twist.
Right.
I will say, I don't think I like it quite as much as you do. The stop
Okay.
motion stuff at the end is pretty
Mm,
bad,
okay.
because there's moments where it's a wider shot, I believe, and then they're showing the Terminator, and it's clearly stop motion,
Right.
and it doesn't really stay in pace with the other effects in the film.
Mm,
But that's a minor knock. I mean, you mentioned some of the other effects. I mean, the miniatures,
hmm.
they do forced perspective. I mean, all kinds of great
Yeah.
tricks and stuff, like for some of the future scenes and that sort of
Sure.
thing. And so there's some really great effects in the film.
Hmm.
So it's not that I think it kills it for me or anything like that.
Right.
I did want to mention one thing while we're on this film. So the Terminator, he looks in the phone book to find Sarah Connor, and he kills them off in chronological order. And
Right.
so while I was rewatching it, I was thinking, what if there were like 50 of them,
Right.
and she was like the 49th? I mean,
Yeah.
that's a lot of kills to track down before you get the right one.
Right.
No, but anyway, yeah, I mean, this it's where it all started, and I do really enjoy this film.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think regarding the stop motion, briefly, I think maybe the reason it works for me is because it is a robot. So I don't really mind that he's a little herky-jerky because he's a robot. So maybe that's why I
Yeah.
maybe give it more of a pass than you do. But yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think it is such a great story. And Essentially it kind of comes down to it end up being a love story between Kyle Reese and
Yeah,
Sarah Connor, which is
yeah.
very different from, the rest of the films in the franchise. So, yeah, I really, really enjoyed that one. It kicked it off with a bang. So let's jump now though into where it began for us, which is Terminator 2 Judgment Day, released July 3rd, 1991. 2 hour, 17-minute runtime on this one. Much bigger budget, $102 million budget. Ended up grossing $520 million worldwide. Adjusted for inflation, that would easily be a billion. So this
Yeah.
is a huge summer blockbuster. This one, obviously the budget is so much bigger, because Cameron had the clout at this time, right? He'd made Aliens,
Yeah.
he had made The Abyss, and so he was at a point in his career where he could get this kind of budget for his films. The opening scene of this film, which kind of mirrors the first film's opening scene, the future war, that scene cost more than the original movie. Cost over $6 million just for that one scene. So yeah, we're dealing with a whole nother level of filmmaking here as Cameron has kind of perfected the craft and the effects have leaped forward. I mean, this is before Jurassic Park, right? So this is CGI in its very earliest forms,
Yeah.
and it is astonishing what they're able to accomplish. I mean, really incredible stuff.
It
I
is.
consider
Yeah.
it one of the greatest sci-fi action movies of all time. I think
Hmm.
it's James Cameron's finest achievement. It's so, again, character centric. That's the key to these first two movies. I think they're so focused in on Sarah Connor, on this one, John Connor, now who's a teenager. And where we find them is so surprising. If you coming off that first movie, where do you think Sarah Connor would be? Well, she's in an insane asylum. It's kind of the last place you would think she would be, our hero of our franchise here. And then of course, John is off with his foster parents and he's very rebellious and that whole thing. So just the kind of setup of the film is very interesting. Of course, two characters are sent back in time again. If you're coming off the first movie, you're thinking Arnold, oh, here's our villain, he's coming back to hunt him down. And you assume Robert Patrick is maybe another, soldier from the future come to, help. And of course, it flips it all on its head. No, Arnold's the good guy this time. He's a Terminator that's been reprogrammed, and he's sent back in time. And Robert Patrick is playing this new Terminator, the T-1000. And he's of course the subject of most of the incredible effects work when it comes to the CGI and the liquid metal. And what they did with that whole thing is
Yeah.
just astonishing. Still to this day, like I say, it holds up extremely well. And so, yeah, it's really, really incredible. Again, it's still emotionally engaging. What the characters are going through and the character development that happens with all of them is really great. The T-800 himself being a central figure in that, as he kind of learns about humanity and becomes more human himself throughout the movie, getting to deliver some good old Arnold one-liners and things like that, as he kind of learns from John Connor. So I like all of that. I think, this is so many iconic moments here, just the whole look of the term. When you think of the Terminator, I feel like you think of Arnold in the black leather on the motorcycle with the shotgun, that whole thing. So this
Yeah.
just delivers a lot of great visual iconography that's, easy to recall. Again, great performances across the board. As I mentioned, Edward Furlong, this young actor, he's 12 or 13 at the time, I think, and just really does a great job. He has a lot to do. He has a lot of, emotional beats he has to play that are kind of subtle,
Yeah.
and things like that. So he's extremely mature for his age, as an actor. He
Hmm.
just does such a great job. Linda Hamilton bringing it again to another level of becoming this big action hero now. I mean, she just got ripped for the role, first of all. And then
Yeah.
what she's dealing with psychologically is so interesting and so complicated. And so it's again, I feel like it's taking everything from that first movie, from the effects to the characters to the story, just upping the ante on every level. So huge fan of this one. I think they do a great job, again, carrying over the themes of fate and free will and all of these different elements to it, retaining your humanity. That's really at the central kind of point of a lot of these movies is, the Terminator kind of becomes more human than Sarah Connor. She's kind of become this cold killing machine herself. And so
Right.
she kind of has to go through this whole development of her character. So it's just a lot of layers to it, a lot of, interesting themes and ideas. Great ending, very emotional ending. It really chokes
Yeah.
me up every time. Still to this day, the thumbs up moment is just an all-time great one. And then the action on top of all of this, the chases with the motorcycle and the helicopter and the truck, and it's just all of it. It just, again, it really just takes it to another level, and I think is extremely memorable. So those are kind of my initial thoughts on T2. Bert, why don't you give us some of yours on this extraordinary sequel?
Sure. And at first, let me say I'm not all the way through it, but I'm enjoying your commentary that you recorded for your
Oh,
channel.
oh, thanks. Yeah,
So
Carson, I
yeah,
just
I'll
did
be
that. Yeah,
yeah,
appreciate
that's
it.
that's good stuff of what I
Hmm.
heard so far. The twist on the first one, like we were talking about, where now it's not even Arnold. That's that's the scary Terminator. It's
Yeah.
just a great idea,
Yep.
And then yeah, the visuals, in usual James Cameron fashion, he doesn't just take it up a notch. He takes it up like two or three notches,
Yes, it's
and
true.
then and basically is a does groundbreaking stuff with
Hmm.
CG. And
Yeah.
that liquid metal, to me, it's incredible how at times it's beautiful to look at, and at times it's kind of monstrous, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of the holes that are blown in it and stuff are just, I
Right.
mean, it kind of reminds you of The Thing, right?
Oh, sure. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
And Arnold, obviously Arnold's the only one that could play his role the way he does, and he's
Yeah.
so good
Hmm.
in part one and two,
Right.
that bar is pretty high to meet, and it's incredible that this relatively sort of thin framed Robert Patrick can be
Right.
so good,
Yeah.
with that bar set so high,
Right.
because he is very menacing, downright
Hmm.
scary
Oh,
at
yeah.
sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
But really, it's Linda Hamilton that stands out the most. I mean,
Mm.
she just gives such a powerful performance. And I mean, obviously transformed her body,
Yeah.
and all that,
Hmm.
and just really sells the desperation. I mean, if you don't have like someone that can sell it,
Yeah.
then the whole thing kind of collapses, because you're
Yep.
not really buying that it's actually happening. But
Yes.
she's the one, selling the whole show. and
Right.
and Furlong does good too. There are a
Yeah.
couple sort of awkward lines of dialogue that he's given, and even
Mm.
those he does pretty well with. but
Sure.
but all the dialogue, it has to be very natural sounding, because it
Hmm.
could have been really bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's true.
Furlong does a very good job with that as well. Yeah,
Hmm.
the action's iconic. This is, I talk about these movies that I would put in to show off my sound system when I first got it,
Yeah.
many
Sure.
years ago, the
Right.
surround sound, and this
Yeah.
one in the mall,
Oh,
with
yeah.
when the two Terminators are coming around the corner in the hallway, and Arnold steps on that rose and crunches it. I mean, there's just so many moments like that are just so,
Right.
yeah, just so iconic.
Yes.
um and there's great stunts in this.
Oh, yeah.
I love the soundtrack too, and the sound effects,
Mm.
as I kind of mentioned.
Yep.
This isn't just one of the top sci-fi films of all time. It's one of my favorite films,
Yeah.
across the board of all. I think it's in my top 15 for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's in my top 15 too.
Mm,
It's way up there.
yeah,
It's great. I'm glad you mentioned the music. Brad Fidel, who did the music for the first and second films, just knocked it out of the park. What an
yeah,
iconic, that doo-doo, doo-doo, doo-doo. I mean, just
yeah,
you hear
yeah.
that, you instantly know what it is and what you're hearing, and
Yeah.
it has that great melody over the top of it. It's very
Uh-huh.
percussive and like, intense, but it's also got, that other stuff on top of it, which is, emotional and engaging. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
one of the best scores I think ever written.
Yeah, I was gonna
Um,
say too, it's a synthesized score, which really
yeah.
works here because
Hmm.
it's digital. Like
Yes.
it's not like this isn't artwork per se. This is very
Exactly.
much like this is computers making the music.
Right.
These are
Right.
computers running the robots.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. Yeah, it all works together. It's all very well thought out and planned out, and yeah, it's just a great film, great craftsmanship all across the board from every member of the cast and crew. They just did an excellent job with this. So, all right. Well, are you ready to move on to T3?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that brings us to Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines, released July 2nd, 2003. Runtime of an hour and 49 minutes, budget of $187 million, grossed $433 million at the box office. So this is, of course, years later. Studios are always looking for where's our next sequel? Where's our next? We gotta make some money off Terminator. And I think the rights changed hands several times. I know throughout
Oh,
the
really?
series. Yeah, I'm not sure who owned it at this point, but um, They ended up getting together. You know, new director Jonathan Mostow comes in to direct this one. James Cameron really wasn't involved much at all in this production. It's got different writers and um, pretty much an all new cast as well. Edward Furlong was going to reprise his role. He unfortunately was dealing with drug addiction at the time, was not able to
Oh,
reprise the role. He was cast and everything, and they ended up having to drop him. And they
wow.
went with Nick Stahl, comes in as John Connor. Again, this is years later. He's now an adult, and of course, Arnold's back. Arnold is back as the T-800, a new T-800 who sent back in time to rescue John Connor from another advanced Terminator. I think they call her the TX, uh, who takes a female form. And so this film, it kind of plays out like a remake of T2 in many ways. Like they're just kind of rehashing that idea. Yeah, Terminator sent back in time again, got to save John Connor. And it kind of falls flat for me. It's kind of a generic action movie, is what I look at this as. I think if it had just been titled Rise of the Machines and wasn't connected to the Terminator franchise, I might like it a little bit more. Um, it kind of undoes everything that Terminator 2 did at the end of that movie. We prevented Judgment Day. Just kidding. You actually didn't. It's inevitable, and we're just gonna have to deal with it. So it kind of goes back on some of those themes that those first two movies set up. It just it kind of just falls flat on every level. I feel like the direction just when you're not James Cameron, it's kind of like you're just not going to be able to achieve that kind of greatness. It over relies on CGI. This early 2000s, it was like just pumping out, tons of CGI and all these big action movies. And some of it looks good, but some of it looks pretty wonky. And so there's some memorable moments, there's the cool kind of crane sequence and there's, the cool gunfight at the graveyard. And there's some, moments that I enjoy, just as kind of a fan of action movies. But again, I feel like it doesn't really deliver on the characters emotionally. I think the actors just aren't there. The script isn't really there. The direction's not there. Nothing really noteworthy on that end. It kind of goes for comedy a little too often. I feel like, T2 has so many great moments of levity that are just, character centric and organic and they work. And here it just kind of feels a little forced, a little cringy at certain moments with Arnold and the sunglasses and, the talk to the hand moment. All these kind of are just kind of silly that I don't think they really work. But it does have a bold ending. I'll give it credit for kind of going with this bold ending of, yeah, Judgment Day is inevitable, and we actually see it happen at the end of this movie. And so I give it credit for that. But again, I feel like it kind of betrays the first two movies a little bit in doing so. So it's a mixed bag for me. I'm definitely one of the weaker films in the franchise, on my opinion. So Bert, give us your thoughts on Terminator 3.
Big fan of this one. I just
Okay.
really like the fact that we get, one more adventure of the T-800. Well, actually, I guess this is a T-850.
Oh,
I don't
right,
nerd
yeah.
out too much about this, but does have some upgrades, like the ability to,
Sure.
his core is like a nuclear
Yeah,
explosion when he throws it or
right.
whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, and it is pretty much in line for me with T1 and T2.
Mm,
I don't really feel it's disjointed or anything like that.
mm,
I just find it interesting. This is John Connor. Like what would he do if he was just basically waiting for Judgment Day to happen?
right.
And there's some interesting themes that they revisit, such as that Arnie's Terminator is kind of a surrogate dad for
Oh,
for
yeah.
John
Sure.
and T2, and then so in T3, I mean, he thought he said goodbye to that, and he
Mm,
did, but I mean, so
hmm
now he's back,
Yeah.
and this sort of the emotional interplay there is pretty interesting.
Mm,
This idea that about the only father you've really known and
mm,
protector is now back, and uh,
hmm
this the Terminatrix, which John refers to her as,
Yeah.
it's interesting. In some ways, she's kind of a downgrade from Robert Patrick,
Yeah.
as far as his abilities is, and what they show. At the same time, though, she's got sort of this arm cannon, so she
hmm
can. It's like the only Terminator that can attack. without having to stand right next to the victim, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And then of course it gets damaged and then it becomes a flamethrower, which is also pretty cool.
yeah.
I think Claire Danes and Nick Stahl have some good chemistry. I like Nick Stahl as John Connor here. He seems like right in line with Edward Furlong. I think that's pretty good casting. Um, I kind of like the humor that is in there. It doesn't ruin it for me. I like the stunts. What I really enjoy, maybe almost the most, is how we get to see this inside glimpse of essentially the office building where Skynet is,
Oh
and you get to
yeah,
see the people that are getting ready to throw the switch. Then they throw the
right.
switch. Then we get to see some Terminators that will. I think for the first time we see these T1s, which are like little mini
Yeah.
tanks,
Uh-huh.
and they're wheeling down the halls and start taking out the employees, and then
Yeah.
the hunter killers, the HKs,
Hmm.
when they're like literally flying through the hallways and stuff. I guess it's something that I didn't think we'd ever see, and the fact that we get that in this movie is really cool to me.
Hmm.
There's some really good music in this film too, and I personally love the ending. I think it's yeah, it was unexpected, and I mean it kind of leads right up next, it leads you right into
Yeah.
Salvation on the next film, although they're not tied maybe quite so closely. But
Right.
yeah, I get really a lot of enjoyment from T3.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Very good. All right. So that brings us to an interesting point in the franchise when it went to TV. We're going to talk about this briefly. The Sarah Connor Chronicles ran for 2 seasons and garnered a lot of fans. I guess mostly after the fact, probably because it was canceled early. I think it was like canceled in the middle of a season or something, I believe. But I think Bert, you've seen all of this, right? I've
Oh
only
yeah,
seen the
yeah,
pilot,
yeah.
which I thought was okay. Again, I felt like it was kind of retreading T2 a little bit, and I couldn't really get into it. Again, that the characters are so tied in with those actors, Linda Hamilton and
Mm.
Edward Furlong for me that anytime they recast, which we'll talk about that again soon, it doesn't necessarily work for me. So what did you think of the series? Again, I know it has a lot of fans.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
not sure how much you'd like it because it is sort of the further adventures of Sarah and John
yeah.
on the run trying to escape Terminators. There's actually
Right.
multiple different Terminators that get sent back throughout
Hmm.
the course of the show
Okay.
at various times. Sometimes they're in one scene and they're gone, and then other times they stick around. One
Okay.
of them stays around for pretty much the entire 2 seasons.
Hmm.
And so it just I really like how it explores the Sarah and John's relationship
Okay.
and dealing with this burden of just trying to exist and stay alive all the time.
Hmm. Right.
And we get about 22 hours of Lena Headey as Sarah.
Hmm.
So,
Right.
and I've watched the series twice now, and so after
Okay.
some time, I mean, I like her almost just as much as
Oh,
what's her name?
Linda Hamilton. Yeah.
Linda, thank you, Linda
Yeah.
Hamilton. And so there's some really good stuff there. We get to see some really cool things that movies don't have time for,
Right.
and we find out some interesting things such as if a Terminator jumps off a pier into the water, it's going straight to the bottom.
Oh, okay.
So that's one way you can escape a Terminator
Ah,
because it can't
interesting.
swim. It's too heavy.
Ah, right.
And
Hmm.
and also you get to see Terminators. Sometimes they're in standby mode,
Hmm.
either before they are going to start a mission or when they finish a mission. So
Okay.
you could have a Terminator that's been like planted behind a wall and has been there for 20 years, and then when a certain time hits, it sort of wakes up and goes into
Oh.
action. Some
Hmm.
interesting stuff like that.
Okay.
And the show has this really excellent main musical theme too. I should
Hmm.
mention some of the episodes get a little bit, they stray a little too far from sort of the main objective, but overall,
Yeah.
that's some really great stuff if you're a fan of Terminator.
Okay. Okay. Maybe I'll try to watch some more episodes then. That sounds pretty intriguing. Intriguing way to further the mythology. So yeah. Okay, great. Well, let's jump now into Terminator Salvation, released May 21st, 2009. Runtime of 1 hour and 55 minutes, budget of $200 million, grossed
Wow.
$371 million. So, biggest budget yet. But again, if you've noticed since T2, the gross increases have not increased, they've decreased. So,
Yeah.
it wasn't a huge hit, but I think this is easily the most underrated Terminator movie for several reasons. First of all, It's essentially a prequel, if you think about it, to the first movie. If you think the first movie starts in 2099,
Sure. Yeah.
um, and then jumps to 1984, this is before all that. That's how I kind of think of it in my head. Like you said, you can think of it as a sequel to T3 as well. It works that way too. But the way I kind of think of it is it's kind of before all that happened. All, he sent Kyle Reese back in time and all of that. So, but again, it's post Judgment Day after the bombs have gone off. We get to finally see a full-length film showing us the war between humanity and the machines. That's what really is interesting to me about this. It's not another, hey, let's send a Terminator back in time to kill John when he's a teenager. Let's send him back in time to kill, it's like they do that so often that I'm like, we needed something fresh. And I think this was exactly what I wanted to see. And McG directs this. I like him a lot as a director. I think he's really great. He did the Charlie's Angels movies. I think those are tons of fun. This is a very different kind of tone from that. Those are much more, comedic kind of action movies, whereas this kind of gets a lot more serious. But I think he does a really good job. I got to watch it last night with the Maxim movie mode, which is one of those like
Oh,
picture-in-picture director tracks where he comes on screen and talks about
really?
the movie and can pause the movie and show you
Yeah.
behind the
Yeah.
scenes footage and all that. It's really fascinating. He's got a lot of enthusiasm. He's a huge fan of the franchise, you can tell. So that kind of made me appreciate the movie even more. But I think this is just a really solid post-apocalyptic action movie. That's kind of how I look at it. And it doesn't necessarily negate everything that T1 and T2 did, which I like as a fan of those movies. So I think it does a good job there. I like the cast. I mean, Christian Bale, he's at the top of his game here, coming off of Dark Knight, playing, grown-up John Connor, who's not the leader of the Resistance yet, but he's kind of a leader in the Resistance. And it's interesting what they build around him, this kind of legend around him of he's, this prophesied Messiah of the
Yeah.
humanity. Is he going to do this? And how does he respond to that? And how do other people respond to that? Some people think it's all a lie. Other people totally believe it. It's
Hmm.
really an interesting dynamic they kind of explore there. Of course, you have Sam Worthington, who I'm a big fan of. A lot of people don't really care for him much as an actor. I think he's really good. I really like his performance as Marcus Wright. He's kind of the new element to this film that we haven't really
Yeah.
seen before. This kind of half human, half robot thing
Hmm.
that even he isn't aware of. And so that I found to be a really compelling new idea here that they explored. Bryce Dallas Howard does a great job in her, kind of smaller role. Moon Bloodgood, I really like as Blair. She's got a great character there. And then Anton Yelchin, who, we lost way too soon.
Yeah.
He, I think, is a really interesting young Kyle Reese. He's kind of a teenage Kyle Reese. He's not the Michael Biehn character we know from the first one yet, but you kind of see the hints of how he could become that character in this. And I think it's a really interesting performance that he gives. So it's really interesting, dynamics with the characters. I find the action sequences to be thrilling. The new Terminators we get here, a lot of new ones. The Harvester, which is this big giant one, and then you've got the
Hmm.
Moto Terminators, the little motorcycles, and
Yeah.
the little
Yeah.
drones, and just all these interesting different Terminators that we hadn't seen before. Um, that I think are really, really cool looking. I think the effects again here hold up really well. McGee
Hmm.
talked a lot about in the commentary where he tried to do a lot practically, which I always appreciate when they're not just throwing a bunch of CGI on screen and it just kind of looks like a mess and doesn't have any weight to it. This one definitely, has that element of, it feels real. The actors have something to play off of. So I appreciate that. Danny Elfman does the score. I think he does a really good job bringing the theme back. T3, I didn't feel like had as much of the theme as it should have. And this one kind of brought it back, I feel like, a little bit more to the forefront. Obviously, the production design here is totally different because we're all in the future. A lot of it's like in the desert or these kind of rundown places. And it looks really good. I think the movie looks great. It's got that desaturated color palette that was copied a lot in movies like Book of Eli, kind of has a similar look to
Yeah.
this. We
Yeah.
came out about a year or two after this. And so I like that look. And they did a lot of research, as far as, what would nuclear fallout look like as far as the plant life and different things like that. They really went into some pretty incredible details here with a lot of this. So I really like it. Again, I think it's really interesting. It explores different elements of the characters Has some great callbacks, little moments like Kyle Reese doing the one-arm shotgun thing, and
Yeah, yeah.
come with me if you want to live. All these things that are brought back in, organic ways. It didn't feel forced, like they were trying to, oh, we got to have this moment in there, so we got to try to force it
Mm,
in. It just felt kind of natural, which I feel like is difficult to do for movies like this that are trying to pay respect to what's come before, but do
yeah,
something different and new. So I think they struck that balance pretty well. Um, so all in all, I enjoy it. I think, Sam Worthington's character Marcus has a great kind of redemption arc. As you see
yeah.
him in the beginning, he's kind of scheduled for execution. He's obviously done this terrible thing and kind of he has to kind of refine his humanity. John Connor has to deal with his prejudice against the machines. He doesn't want to trust this guy who's, part machine, but he kind of has to learn to trust him. And so there's, again, different themes, but keeps the themes from the first two movies intact, I think, in a way that's pretty compelling. So all in all, I really like it. I really like the way the movie looks. It feels, it has a kind of hard-hitting, fast-paced action vibe. And again, it's a new setting, and I just really appreciate that they went for something different here. So I'm a pretty big fan of Terminator Salvation. Bert, I don't think you're quite as big a fan as I am. So give us your counterpoint here.
I do give this a positive rating. First of all, let me
Okay.
say that it's one of these that I don't want to harp too much on the things I don't like, but those tend to be very frustrating for me.
Mm,
The first half of the film, particularly, the world to me is very kind of ugly, and I get that it's post-apocalyptic, so maybe that's a success, I guess.
right.
Um, the action scenes for me don't always work the best. Like I like the
Mm,
harvesters and the idea of that,
yeah.
but they don't really seem to have the scale,
Mm.
like the robots in Pacific Rim, for instance, or
Oh,
the
sure.
you know what I mean? Like I don't really feel like it's 60 feet tall
Right.
sometimes.
Right.
And but the visual effects mostly work. And you mentioned some really, really cool stuff, those Moto Terminators and stuff. Those are really cool. I like that Kate and John are together, from T3. That's
Yep.
interesting. And
Hmm.
Christian Bale he's okay as John. It's kind of a mystery to me how a guy that's such a good actor doesn't make me feel like, wow, he really nailed John
Hmm.
here. He's not bad. It's not that he's bad.
Hmm.
To
Hmm.
me though, Sam Worthington's sort of character and journey is gives big points toward
Okay.
why I like this film so much. And interesting to me too, at a certain point he's being hunted by John Connor,
Yeah.
and yet I'm pulling for Sam Worthington's character.
Right.
Some interesting stuff there.
Yeah.
Also, yeah, Kyle Reese. I like Anton Yelchin, but
Yeah.
his character doesn't really, the way he portrays it doesn't track a lot with Kyle Reese of certainly of Terminator One.
Right.
So that's a little off to me. So I the second half of the film kind of saves the first half.
Okay.
But so I do like this film, but it just gets frustrating with
Mm.
certain aspects.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, and they do introduce Arnold here again as a CGI
Yeah, yeah,
creation,
right.
which I
That's
don't I
fine.
don't hate
Yeah,
it, but I don't I
yeah,
don't love it either.
right.
They get
Yeah,
rid of his
yeah,
face pretty quickly. They
yeah,
blow up his
exactly.
face pretty fast, which
Yeah,
is, makes it
saves
okay for
money.
me.
Saves money.
Exactly, exactly. So, all right, excellent. Well, let's move right along then to Terminator Genesis,
I
released
can't wait to hear what you
July.
have to say
Okay.
about this one.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. So this was interesting. This was well, okay, so Salvation was the first one I saw in theaters.
Mm,
This one I also saw in theaters. July
okay.
1st, 2015, 2 hour,
Okay.
6 minute runtime, budget of 158 million, grossed
Okay.
440 million.
Mm, wow. Okay.
It was kind of this place where, Salvation didn't do as well as they were hoping. So they decided, you know what, let's just hit reboot on this thing and just really blow it up and start over kind of from scratch, basically. And so I remember sitting down in the theater and watching this, and the opening scene is phenomenal. I mean, we're again in the future. A lot of these movies start in the future, right? So we're in the future, battles going on. Um, Another new actor playing John Connor, Jason Clarke, playing John Connor now. And so, this huge battle sequence, it looks fantastic. I mean, the effects are incredible. It's intense, it's engaging. And then, of course, we have another new actor playing Kyle Reese, Jai Courtney playing Kyle Reese now. And it's essentially what we didn't see in T1. It's like them sending him back to
Yeah. Yeah.
1984.
Yep.
So we got to kind of see that all play out, which is kind of cool for fans, you know.
Hmm.
And then, you know, he of course arrives in 84. And from the trailers, we kind of had an idea of how this was going to play out. But he arrives and there's a T-1000 there now. It's not Arnold, it's not the T-800. And Sarah Connor's there. And of course, another new actress again, because she has to be younger. It's Amelia Clarke, who I think is a great actress. She shows up and she delivers the Kyle Reese line. It's all flipped on its head and it's all weird. And,
Yeah.
you know, what's going on? And Arnold's there and he's old, right? It's, you know, she calls
Yeah.
him Pops because
Yeah. Yeah.
what happened here was his Terminator was sent back to Sarah when she was a child. The Terminator was sent back to kill her. He protected her. He's kind of raised her whole life and
Yeah.
kind of been preparing her for all these things that are going to happen in, you know, throughout the timeline. So you kind of have these moments of them rehashing what happened in T1 and, you know, again,
Yeah.
elements of T2 brought in even from new perspectives.
Right.
And
Right.
so it's an interesting idea. I just feel like the execution fails miserably. I really
Mm,
do not at all connect with these versions of these characters.
gotcha.
And
Hmm.
again, it's not the actor's fault. I think all these are good actors. I think all these actors do great things. It comes down to the script and the direction.
Gotcha.
It just, I feel like, again, much like T3, kind of falls flat emotionally and when it comes to, you know, my connections with the characters. Again, there's cool ideas. It just doesn't really work. And it's another one of these where they include so much computer generated imagery that it feels weightless. A lot of the action just feels like okay, they can kind of survive anything, and like there's just things that happen that just it doesn't have that weight and that tactile feel that the first two movies have. So it's also it gets I mean they build their own time machine and they start traveling through time again to points in the future and it just it's messy. It's messy. It's a lot going on here. It's a lot to keep track of. You know, I think at one point in the movie I was just kind of checked out because it
Ah,
was just too much. So, you know, again, I feel like the ideas, the themes aren't played out properly and aren't explored in an interesting way. It's again, it feels like another one of these movies that's kind of rehashing a lot of what's come before and trying to mix it up a little bit and be different, but it just doesn't really succeed for me. I feel like Arnold, especially, his performance is just kind of embarrassing in many ways, what he's doing here. And I get it, you know, trying something different. I appreciate that, you know, them trying to make him more human, and he's kind of this father figure to her now, and
yeah.
it
Yeah.
just you don't see the journey, so it's not there's no connection there. So it's messy. A lot of it's kind of forgettable. I don't really remember many of the action scenes in it. So I haven't revisited it since the theater
Oh,
because
wow. Okay.
I didn't have a great experience with it. It wasn't one that I was like, I should rewatch that. Every time I thought about it, I was like, no, not interested. So Bert, give us your thoughts on Terminator Genesis.
Okay, first let me sort of pile on a little bit the things I don't like about this.
Okay.
So I feel like with John Connor, the actors that have played him, there's kind of this through line of you know, Ed Furlong, Thomas Dekker in Sarah Connor Chronicles,
Hmm.
Nick Stahl. I guess you got to flip those, but
Hmm.
Christian Bale, like they all kind of can
Right.
see that kind of as the same person.
Yeah.
Jason Clarke is definitely the odd one out.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
not because he's not a really good actor. He's really
Hmm.
good.
Hmm.
So I just thought I'd mention that. Same with Linda Hamilton, Lena Headey. I see that as kind of the same person almost.
Uh-huh.
Amelia Clark, a great actress. Love her in a lot of
Yes.
things.
Yes.
Didn't really make sense casting wise.
No.
Pretty much everything else about this though I really like.
Okay. Okay.
And I get the critique. The script is a
Yeah.
little messy,
Hmm.
but I do really like the things that you pointed out, such as these different sort of takes of you know, scenes that we either did see or didn't see in the past,
Yeah. Sure.
scenes we imagined, like sending back Arnold and
Right.
getting to see that and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
This oh, and I forgot the other thing is that I don't, you know, of all the things to do to John Connor, you know, to make him the bad guy, that's probably the one thing that you don't want to do. But
Yeah.
despite that, I still really enjoy the action. There's some great effects. That there's a scene. See, I don't remember, or you may remember. There's a scene where he's like this shape shifting. He can phase into other things as
Right.
this T-3000,
Yeah.
and he's near an MRI machine, and his body starts to get pulled toward the
Right.
MRI machine, and it's kind of like phasing out of a real body and stuff. Just some really cool
Yeah.
visuals, I think. And so that's fun, and I really like the now Arnold Terminator is he's like the surrogate father for Sarah, so I really like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
And there's a few good laughs. And so I don't know, I can't really say that I can defend this one, but I
Yeah.
get a ton of enjoyment out of it.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. I'm curious to see what the fans are going to think in the comments. See what kind of comments we get on Genesis. Because like I said, it was obviously an attempt to kind of reboot, revitalize the franchise,
Yeah, yeah, sure.
and it ended up going nowhere again. It's like Salvation failed, this failed, and then now we come to our final Terminator film, Terminator Dark Fate, released November 1st, 2019. Runtime of 2 hours, 8 minutes, budget of $196 million, grossed $261 million.
Mm,
So again, diminishing returns in
yeah,
the Terminator franchise when it comes to the gross. This one, there was a lot of hope for this, right? Because James Cameron's back. He was
yeah,
like, I'm
yeah.
gonna really get involved now. I'm gonna
Producer.
produce.
Yeah,
I think he might even have a co-writing credit. I'm not sure.
he was
Or a
involved in the story. Yeah,
story by credit. Yeah, something like that. Um, so he's back on board, and Tim Miller's directing, coming off of the
yeah.
success of Deadpool, and we have Linda Hamilton back. You know, kind of what we'd all been waiting for. And so the hype around this was pretty huge,
Yeah,
and the trailers were very promising. So um, going into this one. I was pretty enthusiastic. And again, I feel like it just kind of falls apart for me. This one, you know, right from the opening scene, honestly, I was I was kind of just done because it picks up right where T2 left, or it's like a couple years later, 98 or something is when it takes place, and you
yeah,
got a digitally de-aged Linda Hamilton looking like she does in T2.
yeah.
Edward Furlong there, teenage John Connor. I'm like, yes, my childhood is back. They brought it back. And
Exactly.
then they just murder it in cold blood. Arnold comes out of nowhere and just shoots John Connor in the chest. And I'm just like, okay, wow, okay. Did not expect this at all for my hero to be murdered in such a bold and cold way. Um, and so I'm like, okay, where are they going to go with it now? Now that this has happened. And what they do is they try to bring in new characters, which again, I appreciate that. I like that idea. I think Terminator Salvation did that really well. And so we have this character, Danny, who we later find out is going to be, we assume she's going to be the mother of the new leader, but she herself is actually the leader of the resistance in the future. Um, and then you have what's the actress's name? I forget her name, but she's playing a Grace, and she comes
Mackenzie
in.
Davis.
Yeah, Mackenzie Davis, that's it. And she comes in, and we learn that she's this enhanced human, so kind of like a Marcus Wright type
Yeah.
role, where she's kind of has these augmentations and upgrades to her. She's kind of like a super soldier or whatever. And then Gabriel Luna as this new Terminator called the Rev 9. They do some really interesting things with him. I think that's kind of some cool ideas. Again, I don't feel like any of them, though, have been upgrades from the T1000. Like you said about the TX, it's like she's got the liquid metal, but she's also got the metal endoskeleton. So I don't know if that's really a leap forward necessarily. And so I've never felt like they've topped the T1000 as far as a bad guy for any of these. Um, so you've got him. You've got some really great action sequences. That opening chase scene, I think, is really well done
Yeah.
overall. I think it works. I think most of the CGI is pretty good. Again, it gets a little effects heavy, especially towards the end of the movie. It's a little overdone. But again, it's the characters. I just I want to like the new characters. I just can't. I couldn't connect with them. I couldn't ever bring myself to go. Yeah, I'm on this journey with these characters. I want to see them succeed. And then when they bring Sarah Connor back, it's just kind of what you would expect Sarah Connor to be doing, which I guess isn't necessarily a bad thing, but at this point in her life, I mean, it's kind of a little, you have to really suspend disbelief to believe that, I don't know how old Lynn Hamilton is. I'm guessing at least in her 70s. To be able to do these things that she's doing isn't really, I can't really buy it. I wish they had found a way to use her in a more of an emotionally interesting way where she could have had something to say to these younger characters, but I feel like they're kind of butting heads a lot, and it doesn't really ever come together. And then of course they bring Arnold back again too, and what they did with him, I feel like is maybe even worse than Genesis. I mean, he's just kind of sitting in a log cabin with some random lady and her kid. I don't know how that relationship dynamic works. When you think about it, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's just strange. It's just a lot of strange choices for me in this movie. A lot of the script issues abound for me in this. A lot of frustrating moments here. Again, because there's so much potential, so much you could do with those characters and make it really interesting and compelling. And I just feel like they dropped the ball again. So it's not one that I have returned to again since I think I revisited it once after theaters. I think I watched it with my brother because he had only seen the first two. So I was curious what he thought if he just jumped from one to two to three, and he didn't like it very much either. So Bert, I know you're quite a fan of Dark Fate. So you've actually defended it on previous podcasts before. So give us your thoughts on the I guess what many consider the true third Terminator movie.
Oh, is that right? Yeah, yeah. And one of the best trailers I've ever seen because
Hmm,
the visuals just in that trailer alone, set to the musical choice that they have,
right.
just were just incredible. I thought,
Yeah.
and honestly, this is a very divisive film.
Yeah.
People hate
I,
the opening scene, but honestly, okay, so we've got roughly 30 hours of screen time between the films and Sarah Connor Chronicles
wow.
of John Connor.
Sure.
So the idea of taking it in a new direction, I was like, okay,
Yeah.
it didn't really bother me at all. I
Sure.
thought it was fine.
Hmm.
And by the way, the de-aging I think is some of the best we've seen,
Oh
and
yeah.
it was really neat to kind of see all three of those characters in one scene again,
Yeah.
like we were back in, like you said, mid 90s or whatever.
Sure.
I really like some of the new characters. I mean, Danny Ramos, I feel like she could be a little stronger. Maybe the actor that plays her, I mean, she's not bad.
Yeah.
Mackenzie Davis, though, I mean, she is what she's sort of like a new thing too. Like the augmentations that she has are really cool to see, and I kind of get her story and the emotional impact that her character has and what she's trying to accomplish, and she's where she came from. Like I feel like they did a really good job of having us kind of root for her.
Mm.
Um, and then I really like Gabriel Luna as the Rev 9. He's not Robert Patrick, but let's say Robert Patrick didn't exist. Like
Sure.
he's pretty good too.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way. Very powerful.
Yeah.
As far as a Terminator.
Hmm.
And personally, I think like the fact that he has an endoskeleton that can split off from him, I think that's quite an upgrade. I mean, at one point he's on the ground fighting, and a helicopter's flying around above him. And I'm like, well, because I think he jumped out of the helicopter or something. And I'm
Right.
like, well, who's flying the helicopter? I realized, oh, that's the endoskeleton. And he
Right.
picks him up, and then so he can
Yeah.
keep going. So I think that's
Right.
quite an upgrade. I think that
Yeah.
black metal endoskeleton is actually kind of scary.
Hmm.
So kind of creepy.
Hmm.
Um, I love I personally I love Sarah's entrance into this thing. It's hilarious. And you're right. She's exactly what we expect, and that's what I want. And
Mm.
they give us so much of that, and it's so funny. I mean, I'm laughing throughout almost every line of dialogue she delivers is hilarious.
Right.
And I totally get it because I know the history.
Mm-hmm.
Personally I think the Arnie at the cabin, I love that stuff. I
Okay.
think that it is one possible, way that a Terminator could end up, and he is an upgraded Terminator from the one in T1, so he does have the ability to not learn emotions, but kind of
Mm.
go in that territory a little bit,
Hmm. Hmm.
and so I think it's great. I don't want either of them stretching too much, and I don't think that they do personally. I think that what they have Linda Hamilton do as an actor, she does a lot of her own stunts, by the way, and I don't know
Mm,
how many of them she does in this film,
mm,
but I feel like she's like dropping an explosion over a bridge. She's firing a weapon. I mean, it's not so physical. You don't see
mm.
her doing an all out sprint or
Right.
jumping onto things like that. I didn't think it was too crazy. So
Okay.
anyway, I think that Sarah gets some really good closure in this film, and then she kind of becomes this teacher to Danny at the end. So this film, I think, has some of the best action scenes I've ever seen in any film. All the Terminators, any other action films, I'll put this up against it. I mean, it's so balletic and bombastic and rewarding. It bit CGI heavy, like on the airplane scene, but I still enjoy that scene a lot. So man, as you know, I'm a huge fan. This film is also, by the way, in my top 15 of all time.
Wow, right up there with T2. Okay, impressive. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Well, yeah, again, another one I'm really interested to see what our comments are going to be like and what people think of this one because like you said, it is divisive. It definitely has its fans. There's no doubt. There's no doubt that a lot of people really enjoyed it and thought it was a good way to move the franchise forward. So, now that we've reviewed all of the Terminator films, it's time to rank them. Here we go. We're going to kick off our ranking of the Terminator franchise. Bert, what do you have at number six?
Well, I've got Salvation at number 6, and honestly, I'm at 3 stars. I rewatched it. I don't know why I feel like I have to say. I almost feel like I'm apologizing for liking it because there's so much of myself that I don't love, but there's a lot of really good stuff in Salvation. That's the fact. Three
Gotcha.
star film.
Gotcha. Excellent. All right. Well, my number six is Terminator Dark Fate.
Oh,
Dark Fate would be my least favorite Terminator film. Only can give it 1 star. Again, that opening
ooh,
scene just felt like such a betrayal. It's not all bad, but most of it I dislike. So
that's
ended
too
up
bad.
at number six for me. Bert, what do you have at five?
That's where I've got the first Terminator,
Okay.
and I enjoyed a lot. It's a 3 star film, but yeah, that's where it lands.
Okay, excellent. At my number five, I have Terminator Genesis.
Mm,
Genesis was just a big messes for me. I
gotcha.
did not enjoy Genesis very much at all. Honestly, the bottom two are kind of interchangeable as far as just my entertainment value, enjoyability of those films is
I see why
very,
you didn't
very
rewatch
low.
them. Yeah, if they're
Yeah,
that bad, I
right.
see why you didn't rewatch
Right,
them. Yeah.
exactly. All right, Bert, what do you have at four?
That's where I have Genesis.
Okay.
However, I'm at least 4 stars on Genesis.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. My number four is Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines. I like it a little bit more than Genesis and Dark Fate. Honestly, not much. I give it 2 stars. So it's not one that, again, I'm clamoring to return to all the time, but it's got some pretty solid action in it, some moments that I enjoy. So that's where I have that one. Bert, now we're on to your number three.
And that's where I've got Terminator 3, Rise of the
Okay.
Machines. I'm at a crazy 4.5 stars on
Oh,
that one.
wow. Okay. Excellent. Well, I'm at 4.5 stars on Terminator Salvation, which is what I have at three.
Gotcha.
I just really like how they changed up the formula. They didn't do another time travel story. It's all post Judgment Day. Just a fun post-apocalyptic action movie. I think that was a smart way to go. I wish they had been able to continue the story. And we could have had a kind of full circle narrative maybe with those
Yeah.
movies. But that's where that one is for me. So, Bert, what do you have at number two?
I have a scandalous number 2. Here's the thing. I rank films based on how much I enjoy them,
Hmm.
regardless of how much I maybe enjoyed them when they came out or 10 years ago. And so at number 2, I've got Terminator 2.
Oh, wow. And the crowd goes wild. Um, maybe for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I mean they're
Um,
booing.
right? Well, at my number two is The Terminator, the original Terminator movie. I think it's fantastic. Rewatching it this week, I was just blown away. I'm so into it, so invested in those characters, so engaged throughout that entire runtime. Like I said, it has that relentless pacing to it, and
Mhm.
just a really simple, clean story, which I like. Kind of the opposite of Terminator Genesis in many ways. So Really big fan of the original Terminator. Give us your number one, Bert. What do you got?
Yeah, that's where I've got Dark Fate. And let me just explain that Terminator 2, I've put dozens and dozens of watches into that film. And it's right there with Dark Fate. I mean, honestly, Terminator 2 is probably a better movie. I'm just telling you that right now, the one I would pop in if I could go watch one is
Mhm.
Dark Fate, because I can't wait till the next time I watch it.
Gotcha. Great. Great stuff. Well, I love that we're on opposite ends of the spectrum on Dark Fate.
Yeah.
But hey, at
Yeah.
least we agree T2 is a masterpiece. We agree that
Yes.
T2 is one of the greatest movies of all time. That's my number one. It has long been my favorite of the franchise, and like we mentioned earlier, one of my favorite movies ever made. So that's where we have our rankings, folks. All right, folks. Well, that's it for our Terminator rankings. Let us know what you think of our lists. Who's crazy? Who's got the crazier lists? You know, maybe it's me, maybe it's Bert. Let us know who you side with on this debate. Maybe your ranking's totally different from either of ours. Leave that in the comments below. We of course wanted to do this podcast because Terminator Zero is now on Netflix, the new anime series from Mattson Tomlin. It is a phenomenal series. I really enjoyed this. It's 8 episodes. They're only about 20 to 30 minutes each, so you can get
Okay.
the whole series watched relatively quickly. It's a total basic reinvention of the franchise. You got no Sarah Connors, no John Connors,
Okay.
all new characters, but set in that same world. And it's really compelling. I like the characters. I like the voice acting. Very well written, unique
Hmm.
ideas. They explore some interesting themes. There's some great action. So I think fans are really going to be pleased with this new series. So definitely check it out right now on Netflix. You can watch all the episodes and let me know what you think. This was a fun one, a long time coming, Bert. We've talked about Terminator for a while on the podcast. I'm glad we finally got to explore all these movies. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Cam. Yeah, Dark Fate was one of the very first things we ever talked about. I know.
That's right. That's right. You're right. Absolutely. I remember that. So, yeah, thank you again so much for joining us on this episode of the Real World Podcast. Make sure you share this on social media, get it out there. We're almost at 600 subscribers. So make sure you share this online. Make sure you like the video. That helps us a ton. Again, leaving a comment helps us a lot. And of course, hitting that subscribe button and hitting the bell so you get notified of all our videos. We will see you next time right here on The Real World.